Hey guys, it's Chris at Highland Guitars. You're watching another one of my YouTube guitar building videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I hope that by the end of this video, I'll have earned your subscription. So what I want to talk about in today's video is how I like to select wood for the neck and the fretboards of the guitars that I'm going to build. Now, it's important to understand I'm talking about solid body electric guitars. I'm not talking about acoustic guitars. It's a little bit different process. I mean, it's somewhat similar, but there are some other things that you have to consider. But with solid body electric guitars, it's a little bit different. So what I tend to do when I'm shopping for wood that I'm going to use in a guitar neck, to put this as simply as possible, I look for quarter sawn maple. Specifically Eastern rock maple, the really hard maple. Now, the reason why I like to use quarter sawn is because I have found in my experience using the wood, it is much more stable and less prone to warpage, bending, or twisting, or any of those other problems that can occur when the neck is put under string tension. Now, you can also use a flat sawn maple. I'm not saying that you can't. It's just the potential for that warping, bending, and twisting is greatly increased. When you shop for quarter sawn wood, you'll notice if you compare it to flat sawn wood, the flat sawn boards always seem to have a lot of twisting and bowing and warping just in their natural state. Quarter sawn wood, however, tends to be much straighter. Now, that's not to say that all of the quarter sawn wood that is available to choose from is perfect. That's not necessarily the case. You have to look at the grain at the end of the boards to make sure that the grain is tightly packed, as close together as possible, and perfectly straight up and down from one side to the other. If it's angled or curving, that's going to end up being more of a riff sawn board, and it's not a true quarter sawn board. Also, a lot of folks will think that you can take a flat sawn board, flip it up on edge, and you've got a magically quarter sawn board because the grain will be running straight up and down. So if you cut your pieces for your neck out of that flat sawn piece turned on end, you'll have quarter sawn wood, but that's not the case. That's not true quarter sawn wood. When lumber is processed at the lumber mill, it's usually flat sawn because the lumber mill can get more boards out of a tree when they process it as flat sawn wood. When it's quarter sawn, they get fewer pieces, and the best pieces of quarter sawn wood are even fewer. So you might get 5 or 6 slabs of quarter sawn wood out of a tree trunk, but maybe only 1 or 2 of those are suitable for a guitar neck. Like I said, you want to make sure that that grain is close together and perfectly straight up and down with very little, if any, curving to that grain. Also, you want to make sure that the grain is running straight through the board. So you don't want it to be curving or changing direction. That's fairly common when you're using a piece of wood like this, which is heavily flamed maple. With flamed maple, the grain is running kind of like a roller coaster through the wood, and that exposes open pores as well as closed pores, and that's how you get the figure. When I use flamed maple, and I love to use flame maple for guitar necks, I think flame maple just looks really nice as a guitar neck. However, it is extremely unpredictable with respect to its ability to resist warping, bending, and twisting. So what I always will tend to do is reinforce it with carbon fiber strips. And I'll use carbon fiber strips that are usually about 1/8 of an inch thick, 1/4 of an inch tall, and then as long as I can fit under the fretboard on the neck. And I'll put one on each side of the truss rod. That usually ensures that the neck is never going to warp or bend or twist, even if I'm using a flat sawn curly maple wood. But when it comes to making what I think are the most premium necks, I like to use quarter sawn maple, that Eastern rock maple. The same is true with fretboards. And with fretboards, I like to use a quarter sawn piece of wood where the grain is running straight up and down when you look at the end. That tends to yield fretboards which are going to be flatter and straighter and less prone to warping or bending and twisting. And you really want to avoid that when you're making the fretboard, because any warp or bend or twist in the wood is going to make it difficult to process it to create a good radius and to cut your fret slots and do all that. If the wood is twisting or warping, it's going to cause all kinds of problems, and it can be difficult to get it down flat while you're trying to process it. And then once you remove it and prepare to glue it down, it resumes that bent or twisted shape, which it's just going to cause all kinds of problems down the road. So if you use quarter sawn wood, it tends to be straighter and flatter, so it's easier to process. Now when you're using a wood like, for example, mahogany for a guitar neck, you absolutely must use quarter sawn, because mahogany doesn't have the same kind of strength that maple has, especially an Eastern rock hard maple. Mahogany just doesn't have that kind of strength, so you really want to increase your odds of making a strong neck by using quarter sawn mahogany. And again, if you're concerned about the stability of the wood, you can always reinforce it with carbon fiber. And I don't have any carbon fiber reinforcement rods that I normally would use for a neck. I just have a cut-off piece here, but you can kind of see what this looks like. This stuff is incredibly stiff, and if you install one on each side of the truss rod in your neck that runs the length of the neck, it's going to keep that neck from bowing. And to install, it's really easy. You just route a slot that's the same dimensions as the strip itself. You press the strip into that slot, and then you drizzle a little bit of thin CA glue, which through capillary action will bond the carbon fiber reinforcement strip into the wood. Then just slap your fretboard on and you're good to go. Now, I should mention that carbon fiber reinforcement isn't an absolute guarantee. It will prevent warping due to, or bowing due to string tension. But as far as twist and that sort of thing, you would need a different type of carbon fiber structure to do that. So really, when it comes to avoiding the twist that can occur in wood, you want to make sure you're purchasing a good piece of wood that's not going to be prone to twisting. And typically that means quarter sawn wood. So ultimately, I think the best possible neck you could make is quarter sawn maple with carbon fiber reinforcement. It's just going to be a bulletproof neck. You're never going to have to worry about it bowing under string tension or moving whenever the humidity levels change. So now the advice I'm giving is not backed up with any sort of scientific proof, because to my knowledge, nobody's ever really done any scientific studies on selecting wood for guitar necks. And I think part of the reason for that is because, you know, unlike the construction industry where you're building houses and buildings that people live in, when buildings fail, people are injured and killed. Whereas with a guitar, if a neck fails, it's highly doubtful that anyone is ever going to get injured or killed. So as a result, there's no reason to have any kind of rules and regulations and codes and inspections before a guitar can be sold or used. And because of that, nobody's ever really done the scientific research to determine what are the best types of woods to use and what are the best construction methods. So it's really anything goes. And the advice I'm giving is based on my own personal experience, having made hundreds and hundreds of guitar necks. I think I'm past 500 guitar necks at this point. So that's my experience has taught me what works the best. So what about non-traditional woods? You see people making necks out of rosewood and ebony and other types of woods. I've even had people ask me, you know, can you make a neck out of cherry or hickory or even pine? Well, there's no rule that says you can't. You just have to go into it understanding what the limitations are for that particular species of wood. And I've always used a resource online. I'll put a link in the description below for a website which gives a lot of data on wood. But it's important to remember that that data is pretty generic for each board. In truth, when you shop for lumber, you can pull out two pieces of maple and they could be very different from one another. They may have come from different trees, grown in different environments. So when you read specific data for test results on wood, you have to bear in mind that that was done on one piece of wood and it doesn't necessarily represent the entire species, because wood is natural and it can vary from one tree to the next. But you can always use different species of wood, and you can experiment with reinforcing with the carbon fiber reinforcement and see what happens. There's no rule that says you can't do that. So instead of asking me, is it okay to make a neck out of cherry or out of oak, just do it. See what happens. You know, if it doesn't work, be sure to come back to this video and post in the comments section that you tried it and it didn't work, because that's how everyone else will learn. And that's how people will make the decision not to use a specific wood based on somebody else's experience. Or maybe they can read about their experience and come up with an idea of how to make a neck work from a particular type of wood, based on some ideas for reinforcing the wood so that it doesn't warp, bend, or twist, or snap, or, you know, whatever. So, but yeah, you know, always be willing to think outside the box. That's how you learn more and get better as a luthier. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up. That always helps. You know, and then of course visit the eGuitar Plans website or my Highland Guitars merch shelf to help support the channel financially, or you can just click that thanks button and leave a tip in the amount that you think is fair. At any rate, whatever you contribute is going to help this channel so that I can continue to buy materials and parts, review them, and do videos and talk about building guitars, and we'll all learn something in the long run. So, but until the next episode, as always, take care, stay safe, and I hope you'll be back for future videos.